The view from the penthouse suite of Adelstein Towers was stunning. Glass framed the skyline, and the early morning sun kissed the tops of the buildings designed by the very firm that bore the name R&H Architects. R for Richard, H for Helen. 25 years of marriage. 22 of running a company together. And 15 of raising a son who now studied architecture in London. On the surface, everything about Richard and Helen McCarthy seemed unshakable, a picture-perfect power couple of the elite design world, floating gracefully between charity galas and exclusive industry panels. But beneath the surface, cracks had formed. Richard was restless. At 53 he had the wealth, the prestige, the acclaim, but none of it filled him. Not like it used to. Not like she did. Her name was Naomi. She was 30, a striking interior stylist who started showing up at gallery openings and design expos. She knew who Richard was before he even noticed her. It began as flirtation, escalated into dinners, and then secrecy. Richard told her what she needed to hear, that his wife refused to let go, that the marriage had long been hollow, that he was the one held captive. He painted himself a martyr. And Naomi, thrilled at the attention, believed him. Helen, of course, knew nothing. Yet someone did. Daniel Brooks had been Richard's best friend since college, a fellow architect who now served as silent partner in R&H. Their bond was ironclad, sealed over decades of wins and losses. Daniel's wife, Claire, was one of Helen's closest confidants, the kind who knew what wine she liked when she was sad, and which political fundraisers to avoid. Daniel had overheard Richard one late night on the phone, laughing in hushed tones with someone clearly not his wife. At first, Daniel said nothing. Richard had always been impulsive with flirtations, but this was different. This was sustained. Serious. And worse, it was all built on lies. Claire, oblivious to the storm beneath their social circle, still gushed about how Helen and Richard are the couple everyone envies. And then came the unexpected break in the silence, from someone no one saw coming. Monica, Helen's childhood friend and sharpest mirror, had joined a private fitness club in Midtown. One morning, as she finished her routine in the spa locker room, she overheard two younger women whispering about a man with silver temples and million-dollar fingers, laughing about the gifts he bought, the trips he promised. Then the name dropped, Richard McCarthy. Monica froze. She waited. She listened more. They didn't even try to be discreet. Within hours, Monica was at Helen's townhouse in Tribeca, face tight with concern. Richie. Helen said, eyes narrowing. You must be mistaken. He wouldn't. I'm telling you, Monica insisted. I heard it. Naomi and her friends were talking about him like he was some sort of sugar daddy they'd conquered. She's seeing him. Helen looked away, blinking hard. No, that doesn't make sense. He's just going through a phase. He's tired. He's been stressed about the Milan project. But the seed was planted. Doubt, once embedded, grows roots fast. It wasn't until a few weeks later, while Richard was in the shower, that Helen, unable to stop herself, picked up his phone. The lock was face recognition. Easy. She told herself she'd only check the emails. But then she saw the text. She read everything. Naomi, I miss you already. I hate pretending you're not mine. Richard, soon. I promise. I'm just untangling things slowly. Her breath caught in her throat. Helen didn't confront him. She didn't throw the phone or scream or sob. She simply stood there, staring at the message, hand trembling. Then she placed it back on the nightstand exactly where it was. That night she smiled at him. Told him dinner with the board went well. Asked if he wanted a nightcap. She had made a decision, to save her marriage without ever letting Richard know she knew. Because Richard was not the type of man who apologized. A narcissist to the core, he blamed everything from Helen's control, to the pressure from her political family, to the expectations of their success. He was always the victim in his story. What Helen knew now was that he had rewritten their life in his mind, turning her into the villain to justify his betrayal. But Helen had power, and patience, and a plan. She just hadn't shared it with anyone yet. Not even Monica. Not even Claire. And definitely not Richard. Helen McCarthy knew how to reinvent herself. Long before she married Richard, she had been taught by her mother, a senator's wife with teeth behind her smile, how to present grace under fire. That lesson came roaring back the night she read the messages on Richard's phone. But instead of spiraling, Helen responded the only way she knew how, with elegance, strategy, and silence. She began dressing differently, not for Richard, not for Naomi, not even for herself, but as a statement. Her figure-hugging dresses, her high heels, her rich curls always freshly blown out. It wasn't vanity. It was war paint. If Richard noticed, he didn't say much. He gave her the occasional once-over at galas and whispered, "You look amazing tonight," but it was hollow, the kind of compliment a man gave out of habit, not hunger. Helen tried everything to revive the flicker between them. Date nights, slow jazz in the kitchen, late-night wine. But Richard was distracted, always half-present, eyes flicking to his phone, mind somewhere else. He was with Naomi, emotionally, physically, and now, professionally. But it wasn't Helen who uncovered this betrayal. It was their son. 22-year-old Miles McCarthy was sharp, passionate, and inherited his mother's quiet intensity. He had returned from London for summer break and decided to do his internship at the family firm. But within 2 weeks something felt off. He noticed Richard sneaking away to the West Wing conference room. He spotted a young woman in designer heels giggling at his father's jokes, her ID badge swinging from her lanyard, Naomi Ellis, legal assistant. The pieces fell into place. One evening, Miles cornered Naomi in the underground parking garage. "You think this will last?" he asked, voice sharp. "My dad is not leaving my mom for you. You're just temporary." Naomi blinked, caught off guard. "That's between your father and me." Miles' jaw clenched. "No, it's between my family and the wrecking ball my father handed you." From that day he stopped attending design meetings. Stopped returning his father's calls. His distance grew into silence. And Richard, ever blind to his own destruction, told Helen, "You've poisoned him. You've always babied him. Now he thinks I'm the enemy." Helen said nothing. Let him believe what he needed to. But inside she was dying. The final blow came one rainy afternoon when her friend Monica showed up at her door, soaked and breathless from the gym. "I didn't want to believe it, but I saw her." "Saw who?" "Naomi Ellis. She works at RNH now. She was at the front desk when I dropped off those landscape plans for Daniel." "She's in the company, Helen?" Helen felt the blood drain from her face. "He hired her." Monica nodded. "She didn't even hide it. Called Richard by his first name. Smug." That night, Helen walked into her closet and took out the diamond necklace Richard had gifted her for their 25th wedding anniversary 3 months prior. A rare piece with a sapphire teardrop, presented over a candlelit dinner at the Carlton. "We may not be perfect," he had said that night, "but you're the only woman I'll ever truly love." Helen had believed him. But now she questioned everything. With a heavy heart, she took the necklace to Delancey's, the private jeweler who occasionally handled appraisals for high-profile clients. "Can you tell me the original purchase date and appraisal value?" The associate smiled, keyed the serial number into the system, then paused. Yes. This was purchased 3 months ago. But, interesting, it was originally set aside for a client under the name Naomi Ellis. There's even a handwritten note attached. To N, for the night that changed everything, R. Helen stood still. Perfectly still. The necklace hadn't been hers. Not originally. He had given Naomi the real gift. Then, for whatever reason, passed it on to her instead. And the cruelest twist? He'd done all this while telling Helen the company was struggling, asking her to be mindful about expenses, that the Milan expansion might not come through. That night, Helen sat on the edge of their shared bed, necklace in her hand, and whispered to herself, "You built a company. You raised a son. You gave a man a crown he never earned." But the game wasn't over. She hadn't told anyone she knew. Not Miles. Not Monica. Not Claire. Not Richard. But that would change soon. Because Helen McCarthy had decided something else. If Richard wanted war, she would give him one, built on truth, poise, and power. And she would remind him, in ways he never saw coming, that the foundation he stood on was always hers. Claire Brooks was not an easy woman to deceive. She had spent years hosting fundraisers, managing public appearances, and orchestrating social calendars that kept her husband Daniel and their closest friends in the public's good graces. But nothing prepared her for the revelation that shattered the image of the people she'd considered family. She discovered the truth accidentally, a misplaced conversation between Monica and Helen, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't wanted to solve. Naomi Ellis. The woman her husband's best friend was having an affair with. The woman who now worked at RNH. The woman Claire had unknowingly smiled at during company dinners. She stormed home that evening, hands shaking. "You knew," Claire said, her voice tight with disbelief. "You knew Richard was cheating on Helen, and you said nothing?" Daniel looked up from his glass of bourbon, stunned. "Claire. How long, Daniel? How long have you been protecting a liar?" While Helen smiled in my face and poured me wine at charity events. "It wasn't my place. It became your place the moment you let me host their anniversary party while his mistress was probably wearing that necklace." The fallout was instant. Their marriage, once grounded in trust, was now riddled with doubt. Claire moved into the guest room. Daniel started sleeping at his downtown apartment. Their children whispered, sensing the shift. Shaken, Daniel called Richard. "She knows," he said. "Claire. She knows about Naomi." Richard sighed. So, this thing is bigger than your ego now. You think you can contain it, but it's bleeding into everything, your friendships, your company, your reputation. Richard stayed quiet. Daniel pressed on. "And don't kid yourself. Naomi is 30. She'll want kids. A house. The whole future. You're not built for that anymore. You're chasing something that will destroy you." But Richard wasn't listening. He'd convinced himself that Naomi was different. That she loved him for who he truly was, not the public figure, not the architect, not the husband, but the man. The one who made her laugh, who promised her the moon when the world stopped spinning. Yet deep down, Richard knew Daniel was right. He couldn't leave Helen. Not because of love, but because her family's political power had made his career. Her father's name opened doors. Her presence at galas softened his arrogance. Their marriage was part of his brand. So he told Naomi half-truths. "We need to keep things quiet," he said. "It's just politics. Timing. You know how messy divorces can get." Naomi, suspicious but still smitten, played along. But the doubts had started. She noticed how he flinched when she brought up having children. How he avoided taking pictures. How he still wore his wedding ring for appearances. Meanwhile, Helen had reached her threshold. One morning, after making herself a cup of tea in the kitchen she designed years ago, she walked into the study and placed an envelope on Richard's desk. He looked up from his laptop, confused. "What's this?" She met his eyes, calm, unreadable. "Divorce papers." His face froze. "Helen." "I've already signed," she said, her tone crisp. "You have 10 days to respond." He stood indignant. "You're really doing this? After everything I've done for you?" She laughed, soft and bitter. "You mean everything I did for you? The company, the campaign donations, the home, the lifestyle? You wouldn't have been in the same zip code as Naomi if it weren't for the life I built." He tried to speak, but she held up a hand. "I know about Naomi. I've known for months. I know she works for the firm. I know about the necklace. I know about the lies." Richard sat down slowly, like the weight of the truth finally settled on him. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "No, you just didn't mean to get caught." He looked at her, bewildered. "What are you going to tell people?" Helen smiled. "The truth, Richard. But I'll say it with more dignity than you ever deserved." And with that, she turned and left the room, her heels clicking on the marble floors, echoing like a slow applause. Everything was now in the open. But the real reckoning had only just begun. Richard was unraveling. He barely slept. His appetite was gone. His office, once a place of pride and legacy, now felt like a courtroom where every wall accused him. He barked at junior architects, made erratic decisions, and locked himself in meetings for hours that yielded nothing. The scandal was out, not publicly but among the people who mattered. In the world of polished smiles, private clubs, and curated reputations, whispers spread faster than wildfire. Naomi noticed his coldness. The tension. She no longer asked about the future. Then the call came from his mother-in-law. "Richard," she said sternly, "I know what happened. And I'm disappointed." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "I didn't plan for any of this." "You men never do," she replied. "But listen to me very carefully. I will speak to Helen. I will convince her to reconsider. A man's affair is not the end of a marriage. The family comes first. Do you understand?" He swallowed. "Yes, Ma. She's angry now, but she'll listen to me. Just lay low and stop embarrassing us." He hung up and leaned back, exhaling. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to fix this. But Helen was not his mother-in-law. And Helen had taken a stand. "You cheated on me and expect me to forgive?" she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. Richard looked up from the leather-bound chair in the lounge, ashamed yet defensive. "It's complicated." "No. It's pathetic," Helen spat. "I put my entire life on hold for you, for this company, for us. And you repaid me with lies and a side chick in the office. Don't talk to me like that. I'll talk to you exactly how you deserve. Don't expect me to pretend this didn't happen." She stormed out before he could respond, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. 6 months earlier, the dinner party. The ambience was breathtaking. A rooftop dinner party with warm lights strung like golden vines, celebrating the firm's expansion into Europe. Helen glided through the crowd in a dark emerald gown, her curls framing her face like a crown. She didn't just look beautiful, she commanded the room. Across the venue, 34-year-old investigative journalist Marcus Dane was transfixed. Tall, lean, and sharply dressed in a navy suit, Marcus had come to cover the intersection of political influence and architecture. But from the moment he laid eyes on Helen, he'd forgotten every angle of his story. She was older, yes, but radiant. Was powerfully feminine. His eyes kept drifting to her, the way she laughed softly, the way she placed her hand lightly on a guest's arm when listening, the subtle confidence in her stillness. Monica, Helen's gym friend, noticed him. She walked over casually. "You're staring." Marcus startled, embarrassed. Sorry? I didn't mean." "She's taken. For now." He blinked. "That's unfortunate." Monica tilted her head, a sly smile on her lips. "Let me ask you something. You like strong women?" "Absolutely." "Beautiful, wealthy, out of your league type?" Marcus chuckled. "Is it that obvious?" "She's not out of anyone's league. Just married to the wrong man." He raised an eyebrow. Monica leaned in conspiratorially. "Here's my number. I'll text you when she's free." He looked at the digits in his palm, stunned. "That sounds premeditated." Monica's smile widened. "You have no idea." Back in the present, Monica sat by her phone. The moment she had waited for was here. Helen was free, or would be soon. Marcus had never stopped texting her, occasionally asking if Helen was okay, if he could send her flowers anonymously, if he should wait. Monica grinned to herself as she typed. "She's divorcing him. Now's your chance. Don't mess it up." Helen had never needed to disappear before. But after the call from her mother, the woman who raised her to be bold, confident, and no one's fool, she felt betrayed in a way that broke something old and sacred inside her. "You're not the first woman to be cheated on," her mother had said. "And I won't be the last," Helen replied coldly. "But I might be the first in this family to walk away anyway." She left the house that night, packed a few things, turned off her phone, and drove to the private vacation home tucked away in a quiet cliffside town 2 hours away. It had always been her retreat, a modern glass and wood marvel she had designed herself, years ago when the company was just an ambitious dream. The irony wasn't lost on her. For the first 3 days she cried, then slept, then stared at the ocean. It was grief, not just for the marriage but for the years, the loyalty, the woman she used to be. On the 4th day she heard a knock at the door. It was Monica. And beside her stood Marcus Dane. The sight of him, tall, confident, with quiet eyes that looked like they understood too much, sent something like a jolt through her. She wasn't expecting company. Certainly not him. Their eyes locked. The air shifted. "I hope this is okay," Monica said, breezing in. "You've been hiding too long. Thought you could use a distraction." Helen glanced at Marcus. "And you brought him as a distraction?" Monica shrugged with a grin. "I brought him because I like when the air gets tense and dramatic." Marcus laughed softly. "I can go if this is uncomfortable." Helen stared for a beat. "No. Stay." They sat on the patio watching the waves crash below. The conversation started light. Books, travel, architecture. Then deeper, purpose, pain, regrets. "I saw you at that dinner," Marcus said quietly after Monica had gone inside to take a call. "You were the most beautiful woman in the room. Still are." Helen smiled faintly. "You have a thing for women in crisis?" "No. Just for women who carry power like perfume." She looked at him, then really looked, and she felt it. The strange pull of someone who saw her. But she pulled back. "I'm still married. And you're what, 10 years younger?" 11, he said, smiling. "But I'm not a boy, Helen. I know what I want." Before she could respond, another car pulled into the driveway. Fast. The door flew open. And there he was. Richard. Disheveled. Angry. Panicked. "I've been calling you for days, Helen," he barked, stepping in. His eyes flicked to Marcus. "And what the hell is this?" Helen stood slowly, her face unreadable. "You're not supposed to be here." Richard turned to Marcus, eyes narrowing. "Get out." Marcus remained seated, calm. "This isn't your home." "I said get out," Richard roared. Helen raised her voice, firm and clear. "Marcus, go inside. I'll handle this." Marcus hesitated. Their eyes met again. She nodded gently. When Marcus disappeared behind the sliding glass door, Richard exploded. "So this is what it is now. You disappear, humiliate me, and bring some boy into our lives like you're a teenager on a rebound." "You humiliated yourself, Richard," she snapped. "I came here to heal. To remember who I am without you poisoning every part of me. And what you just saw, that look between us, that's what real connection looks like. Something you wouldn't recognize if it slapped you. Richard's face crumpled with a mix of rage and shame. You're still my wife. Not for long. He scoffed. What are you going to do? Start over? With some journalist? What will people say? Helen looked him dead in the eyes. They'll say I finally came to my senses. Richard stood before Naomi, wine glass in hand, with that same half-earnest charm he used to deceive everyone. I've made up my mind, he said. I'm divorcing Helen. Naomi's eyes lit up, a little guarded but hopeful. Finally? Are you sure? He gave a dramatic sigh, stepping closer. Yes. It's been over for a long time. She just won't let go. What he failed to mention was that Helen had already served him the divorce papers, and the only thing he was holding on to was his reputation. Naomi didn't know. Not yet. Meanwhile, Helen, far away from the carefully constructed lies, was finally stepping into something new. After several days of convincing from Monica, Helen agreed to go out with Marcus Dane. No fancy gala. No pretense. Just dinner by the bay and a walk through a moonlit trail. I haven't laughed like this in years, Helen said, touching Marcus's arm as they sat across from each other at the outdoor bistro. That's tragic, Marcus replied, gazing at her. Because your laugh is the best part of your voice. And in that moment, with the lights twinkling, the ocean humming in the distance, Helen allowed herself to hope that maybe her life wasn't ending. Maybe it was finally beginning. But while Helen was finding joy again, her son Jordan was unraveling. He hated what his father had done to their family. Hated how his mother had been humiliated. And he didn't understand why she was now dating someone new, as if everything could just be erased. So he drank. He drank too much. And that night at a rooftop bar downtown he met a woman. Beautiful. A little bitter. A little reckless. They talked. They flirted. They drank more. Then, somewhere between confusion and chemistry, they kissed. He didn't even know her name until the next morning. And when he realized who she was, Naomi, his father's girlfriend, he nearly threw up. Naomi was equally horrified. Wait, you're Jordan? Richard's son? Jordan looked at her, jaw clenched. Guess neither of us asked the right questions. It was the perfect storm. When Richard found out, he exploded. He stormed into Jordan's apartment, seething. You slept with her? Jordan leaned against the counter with a cold smirk. Didn't know you were still her only client. Richard lunged at him. Fists flew. Words were shouted. Decades of suppressed resentment boiled over. It wasn't just about Naomi, it was everything. Richard's failures as a father. His betrayal of Helen. His inability to control the fallout of his own lies. They had to be pulled apart by a security guard from the complex. Meanwhile, Naomi, shattered by the truth and disgusted by the chaos, packed her things and left Richard's penthouse. For good. Back at the coast, Helen was unaware of the storm brewing in the city. She was spending more time with Marcus. Slow mornings with coffee, long walks, creative conversations about architecture and storytelling. There was life in her again. One evening, he looked at her and said, "You're not just healing, Helen. You're becoming." She smiled softly, her fingers lacing through his. I never thought I'd feel like this again. Naomi sat on the cold bench of the local precinct's holding cell, nursing a busted lip and mascara-streaked cheeks. Across from her, Monica, Helen's sharp-tongued gym friend, folded her arms, glaring. You're not even embarrassed, are you? Monica muttered. Naomi scoffed. She started it. You slept with her best friend's son, Monica snapped. And then had the nerve to mouth off in public? It had started as a heated argument in a restaurant bathroom, where Naomi confronted Monica about allegedly turning Helen against Richard. Words turned to shoves. A broken bottle. And the next thing they knew, jail. While they sat cooling off, Monica leaned forward, her voice low but pointed. Let me tell you something, princess. You think he loves you? You think you're different? Naomi looked away. He was married to that woman for 25 years. Built a life with her. A company. A family. And still cheated. You think you're safe? Naomi's eyes flickered with doubt. Monica added, and by the way, she served him the divorce papers. Not the other way around. So if you're waiting on him to prove anything, keep waiting. Naomi's heart sank. She had believed Richard when he said Helen was clinging to the marriage. That he was the one finally breaking free. But now everything felt like a performance. Once they were released, Naomi drove straight to Richard's penthouse. I want us to be official, she said, voice trembling. Get the divorce finalized. Let's get married. Start a family. Richard froze. Wait, what? He asked, blinking like he'd been hit. You said you loved me. I want us to move forward. I want children. Richard rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding her eyes. You always said you didn't want a family. Well, I've changed. I do now. I want a fresh start. His heart thudded with panic. Marriage? Kids. That wasn't the deal he'd signed up for. Naomi was supposed to be freedom. Skip. Now she was talking about building exactly what he had with Helen, the life he'd secretly taken for granted. Let me think, he said weakly. But Naomi had already noticed the shift in his tone. Meanwhile, across town, Helen was thriving. She and Marcus were seen together at a gallery opening, then a fundraising gala. He admired her brilliance and she admired his quiet confidence. She was glowing in a way she hadn't in years. The tabloids had started whispering, "New romance for architecture heiress Helen Ainsley?" But she ignored them. This wasn't about revenge. It was about rediscovering herself. In one of their Long Beach walks, Marcus said gently, "You don't owe anyone anything, Helen. Not your ex. Not your mother. Not even your name. You've earned the right to choose yourself." And she knew then she was never going back. As for Richard, he sat in his office alone, staring at his phone. Naomi wasn't calling. Helen wasn't speaking to him. His son wouldn't even look at him. For the first time in years, he realized he had no control left. Richard sat in the passenger seat of his best friend Daniel's car, the silence between them thick. "You were warned," Daniel finally muttered. "Naomi's trouble. She was never going to fit into your world." Richard exhaled slowly. "She wants a family now. Kids. Can you believe that?" Daniel gave him a sideways glance. "And what do you want?" "I'm 53, Dan. I don't want to be changing diapers in my 60s. I've already raised a son." That week, Richard booked an appointment for a vasectomy. A quiet, permanent solution to a problem he no longer had the energy for. He didn't tell Naomi. He couldn't deal with her tantrum, not after the string of public embarrassments, fights, and her entanglement with Jordan, his own son. Meanwhile, Marcus, the charming 34-year-old journalist who had fallen for Helen, was sitting across from his editor at a high-end rooftop bar. "I need you to dig into Richard Ainsley," the editor said. "Whispers of embezzlement, dodgy contracts with shell companies linked to political cronies. If this blows up, we're talking headlines for months." Marcus stiffened. "That's Helen's ex-husband." "Exactly. You're in the perfect position." He left that meeting conflicted. The report had already been half prepared by the paper's investigative team. All they needed was verification. His verification. But doing that would mean burning everything Helen had built, and breaking the heart of the one woman who made him feel whole. After a sleepless night, he told Helen the truth. "I've been assigned to investigate Richard," Marcus confessed, staring into her eyes. "I didn't ask for it. But now I'm caught between my work and it." Helen stared at him, stunned. "You knew this and you've been with me this whole time?" "It wasn't like that. I didn't dig into anything, I swear. I came to tell you first." Tears welled in her eyes. "So what now? You destroy my name? The company I gave up my life for? I would never hurt you, Helen." "But you already did." She walked out. When Richard found out, he was livid. He stormed into Daniel's house that evening, yelling. "She planted him, didn't she? Helen. She used that boy to break up our marriage, and now she's using him to come after me." Daniel shook his head. "Richard, for once in your life, accept that maybe, just maybe, this isn't about anyone else. You cheated. You lied. You played with people's lives. And now you're angry the walls are closing in?" Richard turned away, jaw clenched. That night, Marcus sent a long resignation email to his editor, ending with, "I didn't come into her life to hurt her. I came in trying to do my job. But now I choose her. But it might already be too late." Richard lay in his apartment alone, the same luxury penthouse he once flaunted, now echoing with silence. Naomi hadn't spoken to him in days after stumbling on a suspicious clinic receipt. Helen was out of reach. His son, Jordan, blocked his number. So he did what narcissists often do when control slips away. He faked a heart attack. The emergency call brought no one. He texted Helen, no response. He called Jordan, straight to voicemail. Desperate, he rang Daniel. But Daniel had washed his hands clean after the last explosive argument. Finally, with a trembling voice, he had Naomi summoned. When she walked into the hospital room and saw him hooked to machines, she gasped. "What happened?" He looked up at her, pale but calculating. "You came." But there was no warmth in her eyes. Your ex-wife asked me to, she said bluntly. She said, go attend to your man. His chest sank. He thought faking vulnerability would win Helen's sympathy, maybe bring his son back to his side. But even his lies weren't landing anymore. Meanwhile, Helen had moved on, not with Marcus, not romantically, but with her life. She returned to the architecture firm she helped build, now determined to claim what was rightfully hers. One morning, she opened her inbox to find an email from Marcus. No subject line. Just an attachment and a note. I said I wouldn't hurt you. I meant it. I found some things, shady transactions, government kickbacks, offshore transfers. All tied to Richard and a fake subsidiary under the company's name. I won't publish unless you say I should. But you deserve to know. Helen opened the files, and for the next hour, her hands trembled over the documents. It wasn't just betrayal in marriage. This was betrayal in business, in legacy, in everything they once built together. Marcus texted later that night. I'm not doing this to win you back. I'm doing this because you deserve truth, not illusion. Helen responded simply. Thank you. I'll handle it from here. Meanwhile, Richard tried to crash a cousin's wedding, a family affair Helen and Jordan both attended. He showed up in a designer suit, trying to make a grand return, pretending all was well. But when he approached Helen, she turned around and walked away. When he tried to speak to Jordan, the young man whispered coldly, You're just a stranger in an expensive suit. Back at home, Naomi confronted him. I saw that clinic receipt. You got a vasectomy? After all that talk about starting a family? Richard sighed. You were never serious about having kids. People change, Richard. Or maybe you were just buying time like you always do. She stormed out that night. Alone again, Richard sat at the edge of his bed, staring at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, a rich man with nothing truly his. Helen had always been elegant, graceful, and composed. But now there was a new layer beneath the surface, steel. The kind forged from betrayal, loss, and the decision to stop being quiet. With the files Marcus had given her and her legal team's discreet investigation, she invoked her 50:50 partnership rights. Richard had long assumed she was just a silent partner, someone who'd bowed out for the kids and trusted him with the reins. He was wrong. She called an emergency board meeting. The directors, most of whom respected Helen as the true brains behind the company's golden years, listened intently as she laid out financial discrepancies, ghost companies, illicit transfers, and unethical government contracts. The room fell silent. Then came the board's decision, an internal investigation followed by a vote. Within 2 weeks, Richard was relieved of his position as CEO. The same boardroom where he once dismissed Helen's ideas as too cautious, now echoed with her commands. The firm would be restructured under her leadership. His name, wiped from the branding and history pages of the company website. But that was just the beginning. Helen picked up her phone and sent a single line to Marcus. Do it. And with that, the story dropped. Inside the fall of a power couple, fraud, scandal, and the woman who took it back. It went viral. From architecture and politics to mainstream gossip, Richard's name was smeared across headlines. His shady deals were exposed, and the same elite society that once kissed his ring now crossed the street to avoid him. Soon after, legal proceedings began. Richard was to face multiple charges, from tax evasion to embezzlement. In panic, Naomi pushed for a fast-track wedding. Marry me, Richard. If we're legally bound, I can't testify against you in court. It wasn't love. It was strategy, the same game he used to play now flipped against him. And so they had a rushed wedding void of joy or guests. Just paperwork and cold eyes. On their wedding night, Naomi sat on the bed, looked at the ring on her finger and whispered, What have we done? Richard, older, disgraced, and paranoid, looked at his reflection and saw not a husband, not a father, not even a man. Just a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Helen and Marcus had reconnected after the fallout. Their conversations were lighter now, filled with shared glances, healing laughter, and new dreams. She had been through a war, but this time she won. Jordan, though still angry, had started seeing the strength in his mother and the integrity in Marcus. Slowly, their broken family was reshaping into something new and honest.